So one of our subscribers said something to me in a comment the other day that I thought was fairly interesting, worth addressing. And basically what they said is, you know, I like how you can address these catastrophic issues with something along the lines of poise and calmness. And I was thinking about it, and I think I allude to this in some of my videos. I am a faithful person, so sometimes when I look at some of these things, a lot of it is, you know, I talk about issues that are issues that would be affecting farmers, would be affecting the economy, and sometimes it does sound like, you know, it's the end of the world, the apocalypse upon us. But that's not at all how I actually view those things. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. And I've said this several times, I used to run a commercial real estate firm in Raleigh. And it was a firm that I started out of the 2008 financial crisis, actually. I was in the commercial real estate industry. As the crisis started happening, I had gone out on my own to kind of reinvent myself. I didn't like the idea of being held down into a situation where there were too many moving parts that I didn't feel that I had any control over. And I wanted to just, you know, reinvent the wheel on my own. And I created a company that specialized in distressed assets. So a lot of the properties, a lot of the things that we dealt with were already distressed situations. I was a good problem solver, and that was one of the things with the previous company that I was with that I was good at doing. Was I was very good at going in and trying to figure out creative leasing strategies, or just, you know, come up with different solutions to scenarios that would often work. So it was kind of a good fit for me. And the company grew. We had about 15 brokers at one point in time, with maybe, I think it was probably 10 people that were in our maintenance division, because we did, you know, property management, we did services, a lot of great things. Because of the way that our company was positioned, there were constantly fires to put out. Everything was an emergency. And when you're a property owner, you know, one of our clients, and you own a property and things start going south, you know, we're not talking about houses, we're talking about multi-million-dollar properties. People tend to get stressed out. They freak out. I was always the one who was able to go in there and help find a solution. And most of the time, you know, that's how we built our reputation. That's how we grew as a company, was by problem solving, thinking outside the box. And we were good at it. As time went by, you know, being the firefighter I was, so to speak, I started having challenges in my own life. I started seeing things kind of blow up in my face from decisions that I had made. And that was, you know, challenging to deal with, but I handled it the same way I would handle anything else. I took it with stride. Nothing was ever catastrophic to me. In fact, there were times when I felt, you know, literally like no matter what happened, there was always going to be a solution. I had nothing to worry about. Probably the biggest learning experience I had, though, happened on October 31st. Well, it was Halloween 2013. I had an interest in a building that I had been trying to save. I had even just a week earlier gone to California to meet with a large bank out there about making a change in ownership in the asset and putting it into a commercial CMBS loan. And, you know, it looked like a good idea. It was purchased before 2008. And so the restructuring of the debt after the 7-year term of the note was up was an extremely difficult task. And it wasn't something that was going very smoothly. The property just was not worth the debt that was on it, something we see constantly. Even now, today, it seems like we see that same thing happening again. And so ultimately what happened was on Halloween of 2013, the main owner of the building decided the best thing to do would be to put it into bankruptcy. That wasn't a big deal. I had worked with bankruptcy cases before, because this building had a lot of, I was also one of the larger creditors of the building. My initial goal was to try and go in and get receivership. What we did was, because I had a small ownership percentage of the building, we did a debtor in possession. Because I was a management company, I didn't really have what the court considered, you know, true ownership in the equation. I was able to go in and represent the debtors as the receiver of the property. And through some court bashings with the lenders, who were at this point a hedge fund, I was finally able to, win that case and bring it all together. So we fought this case for a couple of years, and when things go into bankruptcy protection, you usually do a workout plan, and then you've got to kind of work out of the plan. We won our plan. We started working out of it, but it wasn't a smooth process. There were constantly issues, constantly battles to fight, and it was something that started dragging on me pretty bad. During that time, I also got diagnosed by some physicians through x-rays and stuff for rheumatoid arthritis in my shoulders. And I turned to somebody for some prayer help. And, they kind of made the comment to me, well, it sounds to me like you're holding the weight of the world on your shoulders. I found it to be a fun and a thrilling thing to go in and try and problem solve and make all of these scenarios work out. This particular building, even though we had won the bankruptcy plan, it was still a struggle. It was having tenant issues. There was, somebody flooded the building and then went back and tried to sue the property ownership for slipping and falling. It was just like every little random thing that could happen was happening, and each battle was won. But eventually, the question came up, well, what happens if you can't get this thing restructured? What happens if this entire deal falls through and the building goes down? The other thing that happened was during this time, I became so enthralled with this particular case, because I saw a large paycheck at the end of the day for it if I could make it work, that the rest of my core business started falling apart. Employees started leaving and going to other firms because they didn't feel that my interests were aligned with helping them grow their careers, which for a business owner is always a bad thing. You don't want to end up in that position. And the truth is that I really wasn't in love with the industry anymore. I didn't enjoy the business. I enjoyed the challenge, and that's what I was focusing on, but I wasn't really all there with it. And one day something happened to this building that was beyond my control. I had warned about it, but action was never taken by investors, and it was hard to get anybody to invest in this thing because it was under bankruptcy protection. So the air conditioner on the building failed, and I was working around the clock trying to get people out there, trying to find out ways to get the air conditioner back on. It was the summertime in Raleigh, and things get real hot. And as things got hot, tenants got real hot. It was a mess, and it was driving me up the wall. And then the fear came over me. Gosh, I've kind of let the rest of my business go. This is all I have left. If this thing fails, everything's just a failure. I had spent, all this time, 8 years running this company, and this building was bringing me down. I felt like the entire world was crashing on my shoulders because of this situation. So I called somebody for some prayer support again, and they asked me, they said, what exactly are you trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to keep something from failing? Do you think that this is a catastrophe that's going to cause a systematic crash across the board? What is it that you think is going on? And I said, well, obviously, if I let this thing go, there goes my credibility. There goes what's left of my business because I've put so much focus on it. And I just can't possibly let this thing fail. No matter what, there has to be a solution to this problem. And I have always been able to pray about solutions and find solutions. And he said, well, maybe the solution this time is to just let God work his purpose out. Let God's law of adjustment work it out. To me, that was, how could I let that happen? Like, what if he just lets it fail? What if God's plan was to let this business fail and let this whole entire thing fall apart and leave me with nothing? And at that time, I was trying to build our house. I had a lot of financial obligations. I couldn't imagine that the answer would be for me to just kind of walk away and do nothing. But there was absolutely no harmony in the situation where I was. There was constant bickering between parties, constant panic, and really in the business that I was in, there was constant panic. I was constantly putting out fires, and at some point in time, you have to look at it and go, am I really doing what I'm meant to be doing? Am I really working on a purpose here? Or is this a self-ego kind of, I'm invincible, I can do anything? And so I decided to take a step back and watch, and just kind of watch and see how things unfolded. So another thing this person said to me was, well, think about everything throughout your life. Every moment in time, things have failed, things have worked out, succeeded, but he was like, have you ever been not taken care of? Have you ever had a situation where there wasn't enough resources for you? Well, obviously not, because I'm still here. And it kind of came down to, I was unhappy with the situation. I felt like I was fighting a battle constantly with those businesses. And, here I was at a crossroads, really kind of thinking about it. If this fails, is it all over for me? Probably not, because God always has an answer for us. So you could probably guess what happened next is I let it go. I let the whole thing go. I sat back, and you know what? At that point in time, I figured there are so many heads involved. There's attorneys, there are other partners. Let them figure it out. Let somebody else come in and manage this catastrophe. And it wasn't so much to say, let's see if they do a better job. It was more or less just kind of stepping back and letting go of the reins, because when we let go of control, that's when we start to realize that that it's not up to us to control the situation or the outcome anyway. But there's always going to be, in every conflicting situation like that, there's always a right answer. There's always a right path for everybody. And we might end up falling down the stairs a few times as we exit the train we were on until we find the next path. But once we get past that initial drop, that initial point, there's always this next step, this next turn that we can make. And so I stepped back from the situation. I came home. It was about that same week that my last broker that was working for me called me up, and he had gotten himself into a little bit of trouble, and the real estate commission was suspending his license. It had nothing to do with real estate, just a personal choice that he mistakenly made. And so he decided that he was gonna go work for somebody else, which I understood. And at that point, it was just me. Anyway, I came back home and just started focusing on, well, what can I do to feel productive and be at peace with myself, feel at harmony. And so I started working on building our house at that time by myself, just found a purpose doing something else. And from that point on, my purpose changed. The entire, there was a period of, what felt like lack, although it wasn't really lack. I think personally I felt more fulfilled. But then, eventually the scenario changes. I found myself on a completely different track than where I was before. And the reason why I'm telling you this is when we talk about all these catastrophes in the world, food shortages, climate changes, financial markets are all a mess. They're going to come crashing down. What if they did? It doesn't really affect you because your supply, your story really isn't going to change. The only thing that's going to change is, the circumstances that you're in. But that sometimes those crashes can send us on paths that are, much better for us in the long run. And there's still, the financial system is going to feel pain every now and then. It has to go through corrections. That's part of progression, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to affect all of us individually if we're making the right steps in our lives and focusing on what's next instead of focusing on the what we deem to be the necessary resources for us. Same goes with food. Throughout history, we've had times where there have been bad crops. We've had times when there have been long periods of famine in the world. And ironically, we've always progressed from those points moving forward. If you look at society today versus society 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, society has always progressed. It never, these corrections actually improve that progression over time. But we talk about them, we always get so fearful of changes as they come, and I don't think that we should just, that story of me stepping back and letting go of the reins and seeing what happens, doesn't mean that we should just, passively let things go and hope to God something will work out. But what I'm saying is, with all these things, we need to step back and see who's in control and recognize that, these aren't catastrophes as much as they are corrections. It doesn't have to affect anybody. The only person it's going to affect are those that allow it to affect them and allow it to drag them down. With that building, I was allowing it to pull me down into this deep hole of darkness and inharmony. And all I had to do was step out of it and watch it crash, watch it fade away. And, as I've kind of watched that situation over the years and different investors that were involved with it, obviously big investors kind of walked away from it, but, smaller guys, they, for the most part, some of them stumbled down that stairs a little while longer than others, but most of them moved on, went on to other projects. It really, what seemed like and this particular project was one of the largest bankruptcies at the time in this area. And what's funny is everybody has since just kind of moved on. Their lives kept going. They've found ways to move on and succeed in other areas. My choice, my path has been less focused on that career incentive, but I also really enjoy what I'm doing now. In fact, I started doing YouTube videos back during that time as a way to just kind of, think about something else, do something else, be productive, help others. And so that's kind of this channel has kind of become my storyline since then. But point is none of these things have to drag us down. It's good to be prepared. It's good to think about them. The more people that are talking about it productively, the more solutions that there are to all of these things. But it's important that we don't sit there and fist bump with each other. I hear with the financial markets a lot of fist bumping with the Federal Reserve. Ultimately, what the Federal Reserve is trying to do, they're not trying to spread the wealth between the rich and the poor. They're not trying to break that gap. What they're trying to do is find a way to get the markets to harmonize so the wheels can turn and move forward. Whether or not they're able to do that, we'll find out. If not, I'm sure that a correction will fix the situation. When we talk about crops and we talk about opportunities with crops, when we have bad crop years, if you listen to some of the things I'm saying, there are always opportunities in there if you're a farmer to pay closer attention to what's going on in the environment, make better choices with planting, or change your farming methods to adapt to the changes that are coming with different cycles. But it doesn't have to be the end all of your business. It doesn't have to be the end all of your farm. It doesn't have to be a situation where you as a consumer can't go out and find food somewhere or grow your own food. We have to pay attention and take action, but sometimes before we take action, it's important to just sit back, watch, and observe, and then take the action that we're led to do, not necessarily what we think we ought to do. Anyway, so when people ask me, how could you talk about all these different things and be so calm about it? That's why. I don't see any of these events that I talk about as tragedies. I think that they're all, in just like an economist would say about the economy, corrections are good. They're when we grow the most as a society and transition onto new things. So there's no point in looking at these things from a basis of fear. That's not going to help you see around it and be a problem solver. It's just going to drag you down with it. Trust me, I've solved a lot of tough problems, and that's never gotten anybody anywhere. So I just thought I'd throw out some of these videos every now and then in between all of the other videos that we create, and hope to share a little bit more with you guys about how I think about things Maybe it rings a bell with some of you. I don't think everybody has to think the same. I think that we all are capable of finding our own way, but sometimes when people share with each other their thought process, it helps spin the wheels and make people feel a little better about, the changes that they see going on in society.